Afternoon now, I believe it is. It's great to be together. It has been a fantastic day. If you are visiting with us today, I do want you to know that pretty much members of our church get appointed, we get the doctoral degree pretty much every week in our congregation. So that's kind of the normal thing. And from now on, what we'd like everyone to do with Anna, we'd like you to call her Dr. Leonard, the Queen, or your high and loftiness. One of those titles, if you could call her by that, we'd appreciate it. For the proper respect. We had a fantastic wedding yesterday that several of us were able to be there for Rob and Cavell, and that was very exciting. At some point we'll flash some pictures up. You'll be able to go see them. You've probably all already seen them on social media and all that stuff. But great pictures, a beautiful spot out in Monroe, and Joe and Gloria. Like Cavell's got like this massive family that. They're not quite all disciples yet, but they're definitely getting closer and closer. And they're just, anyway, just so exciting to be together with family and friends. And in case you were wondering, Rob and Cavell are going to be in the north region of our church. They're in a family group up there. And sometimes we have two services down here. We have another group that meets in Bloomfield. Nobody ever knows where anyone is. But the great part about the summer is 4 times throughout the summer we'll have an outdoor service where we're all together in the same spot in Elizabeth Park. And the first one of those is May 26th, coming up next month. So anyway, we'll get to see everyone and make your phone calls. But what a great day. And I did share this at the wedding yesterday, but a couple of days ago as President Obama was talking, he said it's really been a difficult week in America as you think about, you know, West Texas and then certainly closer to home here with us in Boston and all the dramatic events. You know, it's sad to think that for many days we were focused primarily on terror and fear and hatred, and yet it really was encouraging yesterday to be able to be at a wedding and today to be at a worship service where we can focus on faith and hope and love and who Jesus is and the power he has to change the darkness to light. And so I love being with you guys, but I do think there's even a little bit of a special flavor today as we think about how Jesus can change really our darkness into light, and how Jesus can change it from being a curse to actually being a blessing. Certainly just being together is that. So I want you to open up to 2 Kings chapter 2, and we are actually doing a little bit of a series on the life of Elisha. Everyone I've told that we're doing this is kind of like, what in the world? Who would even think of picking the life of Elisha? I'm not totally sure, but we picked it. And had I to do it over again, I would have given Julius the scripture passages that we have today, because never before, many of us in this room have heard lots and lots of sermons. I can almost guarantee you've never heard a sermon on the text we're going to read today. And if I'm guessing, you're never going to hear one again the rest of your life. So I've listened closely here. This is one of those wild passages that sometimes you ask, what in the world is that doing in the Bible? But we're going to guess it's there for a reason. And so we're going to read together starting in 2 Kings chapter 2. Let's go. And we're going to talk about the good news is from curses to blessings. Sadly, in this story, you're going to see it can be vice versa. You can have a life that goes from being blessed to being cursed. And I promise we'll end out with some good news. So hang in there. 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 19 and following. Here we go. It says, the people of the city said to Elisha, look, our Lord, this town is well situated, as you can see, but the water is bad and the land is unproductive. Bring me a new bowl, he said, and put salt in it. So they brought it to him. Then he went out to the spring and threw the salt into it, saying, this is what the Lord says, I have healed this water. Never again will it cause death or make the land unproductive, and the water has remained pure to this day, according to the word Elisha had spoken. That's a pretty cool, exciting, uplifting story. Let's read the next one. From there, Elisha went up to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some boys came out to the town and jeered at him. Get out of here, Baldy, they said. Get out of here, Baldy, they repeated. He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. And he went on to Mount Carmel, and from there returned to Samaria. Thank you for telling us where you were going after that. That seemed really important at the time. And this is just like one of those crazy passages. I got 3 quick points. The first 2 will be very quick, but hopefully we'll learn something from both of these stories. And the first point is that God can change curses into blessings.
Yeah.
To me, this is really, really important for all of us to get. And there are like a million passages in the Bible.
Yeah.
This is just kind of one of those small ones that we don't even think about as Americans that much. But impure water, God can change the water. God can change disease. God can change spiritual sin and sadness. God can change curses into blessing. You know, this week has perhaps reminded us, but it really didn't inform us. There are just like all kinds of problems in life. Have you realized that? I mean, if I just were to open it up, which I won't, and just say, let's talk about what some of the problems are going on in your life, in your family, we'd be here till midnight and half the crew wouldn't even have shared. I mean, there are just lots of problems out there. There's disease, and there's financial chaos, and there's relational struggle, and there's sin, and there are just lots of problems in the world that certainly can and do depress us. And sometimes, I'm guessing if you're anything like me, sometimes in life you just kind of feel cursed. Like all those fell on me at the same time, you know. Maybe I can handle one at a time, but like 4 or 5 of them all seem to. How many of you have ever like felt God has cursed me and what is the problem here? Or you know, I mean, you can just feel like this is too much. I'm overwhelmed. Why me?
Yeah.
And you can even try to think of all the people in other places that have it worse, but that doesn't even help either, because you know, like, you know, even if I moved there, it'd probably be better for me. I mean, it's just life sometimes can be tough. Here's the one point I want you to get out of this point number 1, and that is, where do you go when you have trouble?
Come on.
You know, what I just realized this week is, in all areas of life, most people have this figured out, but in the spiritual, emotional, relational level, people don't. Like if I have an intense, immense toothache today, if you've got this crazy, if you got whatever, have new dentures, you got some massive, incredible, intense problem going on in your mouth. As sweet and wonderful as Rachel Espejo is back there, who is a fantastic nurse and takes care of sick people, my guess is you're not going to ring up her phone if you got a tooth problem.
Right.
You don't just say, let me find the sweetest person, let me find the nicest person, let me feel one that would make me feel motherly. You're looking for a dentist.
Yep.
I mean, that's what if your car is falling apart, as awesome as, you know, we could pick Mackenzie Schaaf is, as awesome as she is, as beautiful and talented as she is, if your car's falling apart, you're probably not going to pick up the phone and call Mackenzie.
Right.
Not because she wouldn't be a sympathetic, wonderful ear to talk to, but, you know, you want a mechanic, which I'm actually looking for constantly. So if anyone, I pray for people to visit church that are good mechanics and cheap. But I'm just saying, we understand that in the world. There's certain things you're looking for. There's certain people you call. They're the ones that can fix it. And yet, when we get to our relational, emotional, spiritual problems, for some reason we get this idea like, well, if I just like work hard enough and make more money, then that's going to solve everything. Or if I, you know, late at night turn on the TV and just eat lots of potato chips, that's really going to solve the struggles that I'm going through. You know, we think these crazy things, and God is sitting there waving, saying, listen, I can change your curses into blessings.
Wow.
I can help you emotionally, spiritually, relationally. Come to me. And I can turn it all around. And there's just page after page after page in the Bible that says, I want to heal what's hurt you.
Right.
The truth is, the blessing can be greater than the curse.
Yep.
It's the promise of God.
Yep.
And so he picked people like Saul, the worst sinner of all times, just to prove that point. And what I found as I've dealt with people is that we tend to believe this really, really well for other people. Well, of course, Carlos can give blessings in his life. He's like zealous and loud, and most of the time leads the song close to the right pitch. And of course, God would bless him. But we tend to think, poor little old me, God wouldn't help me. You know, God doesn't care about me. And I'm just telling you, it's a lie. It's a lie of the devil. Is that God can take any person, any place, any time, and He can turn your curses into blessings.
Yep.
And, you know, here's just an example of water getting purified. Later on, you're going to read about, you know, an axe going to the body. I mean, God can float an axe. God can heal any disease. God can raise the dead. He can change your curses to blessings. That's the good news. Actually, point number 2 is not quite so encouraging. That's why we have a point number 3 that's coming up after it. Point number 2 is actually God can take things that are a blessing now, and it can become a curse
That's right.
in the end. You know, if I just mention the word children to you, what kind of emotions come over you? If I were just flash up a bunch of pictures of kids up there, we all go, what? Oh. And of course, if it was yours, she's so cute. There's just something about babies, you know, even if they're, you know, a little on the ugly side, it's just like, oh, they're so wonderful and sweet, and, you know, they're innocent and pure. We just love kids, right? And that actually sounds good until you read this story, and I don't know exactly what age these kids were, but we're going to go for like preteens or teens, right? And these kids were like so heinous in some way that God said, we got to find a couple of bears to go maul them. Something that was an amazing blessing. When their mom and dad brought them into the world, they weren't thinking in their preteen years, probably a bear is going to get them. Right. Sent by the Lord. They were thinking, they're so cute, they're so wonderful. But somehow, some way, they went a little bit down the road, and the blessing that those kids were became a curse.
Wow.
I want to just share quickly, this is a little bit off topic, and it's not really like this is the main point of the lesson, but there is kind of a prevalent teaching that children are born in sin. Right. And that was handed down from Adam all the way down to now your child is born in sin. I just want to share with you quickly, since it seems to be somewhat, I really believe that kids are pure and innocent. Yep. I don't believe you inherit your sin from Adam or anyone else. If my father was the worst father ever in the world, that doesn't make me unrighteous. If my father was the greatest father in the history of the world, that doesn't make me righteous. That we certainly we can be affected by the sins or the righteousness of our parents, but you aren't blamed for this. I believe when children are born in the world, that they're innocent, that they're pure.
That's right.
And yet somewhere along the line in this story, those incredible blessings turned into some scary curses. And I want us to just think for just a minute, because, you know, I've talked to, I'm tempted to say hundreds, but I don't know. I've talked to lots and lots and lots of parents who come to me and they'll say, you know, we're so distressed. This is what's happened with our child. And what it almost always starts with is, our kid's a really, really good kid, but they got kind of connected with the bad crowd, you know, the wrong crowd. Yeah. And they took them down this road. And that's pretty much what everyone says, as if like there are never any kids that were the leaders of that. But, you know, I understand. I've got kids. We can be a little subjective. But I'm just saying, it is important that we watch who our kids are friends with.
That's right. Yep.
But actually, a pretty good question even before that is, who are you friends with?
Right.
Because primarily, and though certainly I know peers have pressure and impact, primarily our kids are most impacted by their parents.
That's right. That's right.
And so there are some good questions to stop and ask ourselves. Our kids start off as these amazing, pure, innocent blessings. Where are they going to end up? And I'm not, you know, wanting anyone to just feel overloaded with guilt and trust God, and it's an intense journey for all of us. Right. But I am saying that sometimes we're like, I can't believe my son is so rebellious, or I can't believe my daughter, you know, said that word the other day. And yeah, if you look in the mirror, you know, and they see fits of rage from mom and dad themselves, and they hear, you know, they learn that language somewhere, and it's not all on the school playground, perhaps, is that it's important that we model for them forgiveness and relational interactions and a trust in God and proper speech, and is that they learn most of what they do from you. Yeah. And that's not to say, and I do think it's important to try to help steer and guide and coach and direct them to friends that will be positive and help them. And you know, one of the things I've said all along, and I love Hartford, and God has blessed me to be here, the one thing I've said all along is that if my daughters don't do well here, I'll move in a heartbeat. And I love you all dearly, but if I need to go into Boston where there was a larger team ministry, if I needed to do something else, because God's given you the next generation. I mean, that's a big deal. That, wow, I want to pray for and pour my life into them. And if things aren't going well, which at some point in time they don't for all of us in the room, okay, is to be open about that, to be humble, to try to get all the help you can, get all the prayers you can. Yep. But things can go from a blessing to a curse. In this particular case, it was with their kids who ended up dead because of it. And actually, I went and did a little word study. I won't stay on this long, but a couple of other, I just thought about when were the times that God cursed people, or God's prophets cursed people. That's kind of an intense thought, that you would be so evil that God would have to put a curse on you. And a couple I just threw up there. Certainly the first one makes sense. Genesis chapter 4, when Cain killed Abel, it said God put a curse on him. That would seem like a good point in time to put a curse on somebody. You know, don't run around killing other people, especially when it wasn't like he had overcrowding on the earth at that time.
Right.
But the second one, you have to kind of go read this story to even believe it too. In Nehemiah 13, 23 to 27, the Israelites have intermarried with people from other nations, and God just like goes off. And his prophet, Nehemiah, goes off even more. I mean, it actually says that he starts wailing on the people, pulling out their hair, screaming at them, saying, and God puts a curse on these people. No, you can't go intermarry with people in the world. Don't you see how that's not only going to mess you up, but it's going to mess up the Jewish faith for generations, was really God's attitude. Yeah. Is that, you know, I really feel like all of us in this room are blessed. I'm sure we're all going through intense things. Some of us have had really intense things happen to us in the past. But the fact that we're in this room right now, I think says of the people of the earth, we are very blessed. But the Bible does say, take heed lest you fall. Yep. And just because right now there are blessings in life, the good news is your curses can go to blessings. The bad news is, if you don't deal with it God's way, your blessings can go to curses. And take heed lest you fall. Don't get cocky and like, oh yeah, it's God and me and we're tight for all times. Well, I hope it is. But the devil's after you today and tomorrow and the next day. And don't let down your guard. Keep the blessings that God's given you in your life. Deviate a little bit for point number 3 from Elisha. What does this mean practically? You know, this is deep stuff, and I'm hoping nobody gets mauled by bears today. So what does this really have to do with me? Let me try this. I hope this will be fun for you and good. But how are you going to end up either blessed or cursed in your relationships in life? Let me try a couple of illustrations. And I could use the illustrations in all kinds of relationships. It could be with parents, with children. It could be, this illustration could be for workmates or friends. But let me just try 2 quick illustration examples of relationships. And we're going to start off with husband and wife. All right? As you think about you're about to get married, say you're Eric and Erica over here. You're about to get married, although we probably can't use Eric and Erica because we don't have the right racial breakdown here at this point. But we can have this be like Paul and Dr. Leonard way back in the day when they were about to get married. So put yourself in your correct body type into this illustration. But you had certain desires. Let's have him sitting down. I'm not sure. Okay, there we go. So you had these certain desires for the way you wanted the marriage relationship to go, right? And some of them were spiritual and some of them were just regular. So what were some of those, real quick? What were some of the desires as you entered into marriage? What did you want? Nobody wanted anything.
My best friend.
See, this is like a lady answer right here. Okay, so you want a best friend. Okay, you're thinking of a best friend, and your husband was thinking like a home, a nice house to live in one day and to set up shop. And so you have a desire. You know what? I was going to take off my watch, so we'll make this the best friend. You have a schedule. You know, the wife is dreaming of wonderful deep talks in the evening and bonding and maybe a walk on Saturday morning together or a romantic movie. And the husband is dreaming of like watching ESPN at night while she cooks the dinner and actually while she cleans up his dirty socks that are around the house. So we have these desires. We have a desire maybe for children, right? Many of us, as we go into marriage, we have a desire for not only children, but what kind of children?
Good children.
Obedient children would be nice. Happy children. Healthy children. Children that would, grow up and, hopefully in our case here, love God and all that. We got to get the car too. Joe Wilson was definitely wanting like a hot rod kind of car. So you have a desire when you get married. Hey, we'll have a home someday where these wonderful kids can live. We'll have a car that doesn't break down, that works fine. Whoops, we forgot the pet. Let's put the pet over here. We want a happy pet too that doesn't ever mess on the carpet. We have different desires financially. We just passed through the tax season, right? And so, probably, usually, not always, but either the husband or the wife are hoping somebody really did the taxes well, and they were on top of that, and they've got this great plan for retirement later on. We don't have to worry about anything financially, and so that's a desire that many people have. Some of the fellows in the room were desiring that their wife wouldn't come into the bedroom, actually, but this particular look on them while coming in. But it does look really, really comfortable. And it was on sale at Salvation Army for 99 cents. That's where I got it. So the price is right. But most husbands, that's not exactly the dream and desire that they have for the rest of life together. And I'm sure we could put a whole lot more things down here. But here's what I want you to think about. Those are the desires that we have. And here's something that's really important. How many of those are actually in the Bible? Not many of them. I mean, some of the principles on taking care of finances and being close and intimate, some of the principles are there. But the truth of the matter is, we have these desires, and at some point in time, what happens is our desires become expectations. And that's a whole different world. Because it's kind of, at first it's what I want, but then it becomes what I expect. And then perhaps when the husband isn't as good on the financial side as you was hoping he was going to be, or the communicating and taking a walk on Saturday morning holding hands, or scheduling those romantic dates, or the wife looks at you when your dirty socks on the floor and says, "You got legs, don't you?" And I mean, some of those desires that turn into expectations lead to frustration and resentment and anger and disillusionment. And why is that? What's the problem? The problem often is the almighty I. I have certain desires that I want. And now I have certain expectations that you need to live up to, and when you don't, I'm ticked. And I'm not getting happy anytime soon until you change to meet up to my expectations. Now, let me do a second illustration much quicker. But the same thing happens when somebody thinks about becoming a disciple, becoming a Christian. Yep. You've studied the Bible, you're wanting to change your life, you're wanting to please God, lots of things are turning around, you're about to get baptized into Christ and come out and be a new person, you're all excited, you're all positive, but you have certain desires as you head into becoming a Christian. And some of those desires are things like what? If you're single, God's going to give me a wife or a husband. And He's going to do it pretty soon because, hey, I'm trying to live for Him now. Come on. Let's get moving. If we're married, we have this desire that our husband's going to shape up a little bit. He's going to get better if we're Christians now. And that our kids are going to all grow up to love God and follow Him and live wonderfully. That our friendships are going to be great now because I'm trying to please God. And everybody in the church is going to treat me wonderful and nice and invite me over to eat and help me move. And this is just going to be great. Nobody's ever going to hurt my feelings. Even in fruitfulness, well, of course, if I'm wanting to follow God, I'm going to reach out to all my family and friends, and a whole host of them are going to be interested, and they're going to want to become Christians too. We have all these desires right before we enter Christianity, and those desires become expectations. And all of a sudden, some Christian does hurt our feelings. And all of a sudden, whoops, one of those children isn't exactly gung-ho about the whole Jesus thing. And maybe a disease crops up. If I'm trying to follow God, no disease should be cropping up in my life. I should certainly be able to keep a regular job consistently that pays me a good amount. God, I'm trying to live for you. And when that all doesn't go our way, we even get, with God, ticked, frustrated, low-grade anger. Because we're looking at it, what I desire, what I want, and then what I even expect. What's the solution? We were young, but what if we actually tried to live Jesus first, others second, and the big I, yourself, is last? What if that wasn't the prism through what you looked constantly is how do I feel and what do I expect? My new favorite verse, which might change again, but I shared this at the wedding, but it's James chapter 3, verse 2. It's not even the whole verse, it's just half a verse. In James 3, verse 2a, it says, "We all stumble in many ways." That's what it says. You know, the verse that we've used in our church, at least much more often, is Romans 3:23, which says, "All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." And certainly that's true, and they have. But actually, James 3:2 takes it a whole step further. He doesn't just say, yeah, we're all sinners, because I think we'd all admit that. Anybody perfect? No. We're all sinners? Yes. That's not what James 3 says. James 3 says we're all sinners in many ways. Whoops. What I've learned is that most of us in this room, we don't actually agree with that. Now, some of us do. Some of us just like beat ourselves up and think we're losers and no good. But most of us in this room don't really believe we're sinners in many ways. But if you did, it would change your dating relationships, it'd change your marriage, it'd change your friendships, it'd change your relationship with God. If you really got that, if I really got that, we all stumble in many ways. So what does that mean about a marriage? It means you're marrying an imperfect person a lot of the time. And so you can just be frustrated all the time. Why can't she, get rid of this? I told her and she's been wearing it for 17 straight days. And, we can get all, how come he didn't even, tax day's come and gone and the police are going to probably come and arrest us and we have nothing in retirement. I mean, we can, if you don't watch it, we can just live with this, I can't live. And we can do it with God too. How dare he not get me a husband a little sooner? Or kids that are a little better behaved, or can you believe the preacher actually said that to me? Or, we can live with this, I expect things to be the way I want them, and they're not that way, and we just live with this frustration that kills us. The first thing to realize in a marriage, in a friendship, in a church, is we all stumble in many ways, and we better get used to giving a lot of grace and getting a lot of grace. Because it better flow both ways, or you're not going to make it 5 minutes. We all stumble in many ways. I'll have you, for time's sake, I'll have you go read on your own. But Matthew 7, 1 through 5 is that little section there about you've got a beam in your own eye while you're trying to pick out all the specks in everybody else's eyes. You remember that passage, right? I've read that passage for years and years and years, and just kind of quickly skipped on to the next paragraph saying, well, that doesn't really apply to me. I don't really have like a big beam in my eye and everybody else specs. No, so I'll just go on and find something that does apply to me. And by saying that, what have I pretty much already told you? That's exactly who the passage was written to. People that don't get it, that you stumble in many ways. And if you're thinking, oh, no, actually, you know what? Here's the thing, it's not really me. I do just have a little speck, but my wife, she's got this big beam. My kids, they got this beam. All the people in the greater Hartford church, I try to interact with them, they just got beams. Beams are everywhere, and how can I take out everybody else's beam? That's the way that I and you act often.
That's right.
Like, I don't have that much bad. Okay, I got a few things bad, but oh my goodness, can you believe this person or that person? And the Bible actually says if you would spend the majority of your time focused on your beams versus everybody else's specks, probably that relationship would go a bit better.
Preach it, brother.
In Philippians 4 and verse 8, Paul says, listen, this was a preacher that dealt with all kinds of people's problems. He was single his whole life. If you had a reason for a complex, Paul had it. He said, here's what you need to be thinking about. Philippians 4:8. And what does he say? Whatever is good, true, pure, noble, just, trustworthy. He goes through all, he says what you need to be thinking about all the time is positive stuff. What you need to be praying for with your spouse or with your friends is the positive things in your life. What you need to be communicating with your kids is, wow, I just love you and God is awesome and we can do this together. But usually we stay awake at night thinking, I cannot believe my husband for the 10th day in a row has left his plate in the sink and I am ready to crack it over his head. And we do. It's true. I am so tired of my friends not doing what they said they're going to do. I can't believe, we do. We stay awake at night thinking of the negative stuff.
Yeah.
Because our perspective is the big eye.
Yeah.
And God comes along and says, no, let me tell you something. We all stumble in many ways. What if you worked on your stumbling stuff with God? You'd stay a little less ticked off. What if it wasn't just all about your perspective, but about God's? Our concern must be to nurture our relationships, not disdain them and stay frustrated in them. It's exactly the way that Jesus has treated you. Jesus could walk around totally ticked and frustrated because of all your stumbling and fumbling and bumbling and just say, I'm I'm tired of you, no more. But instead he said, I will be gracious, I will be patient, I will hang in there with you. I want your life to end up a blessing, even if it's looking really ugly right now. I want it to end up a blessing. That's the way Jesus treated you. And he basically says, what if you actually try to treat other people that way? From the Jesus perspective. Yep. Here's how I want to close out. I heard a speech this week on Genesis chapter 22. You're probably familiar with the story of Abraham, who was asked to sacrifice his one and only son, Isaac. And maybe the guy didn't say exactly this way, but I'll tell you what I got out of it. Basically what he said was, he said, people all the time are just saying, oh, God will provide, God will provide, God will provide, God will provide. It's kind of a little spiritual phrase we throw out, oh yeah, God will provide, God will provide. He actually read the passage, and in Genesis 22 it says, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. And he said, you know what? Abraham was willing to go to the mountain of the Lord, willing to even sacrifice his own son, and in that dynamic, guess what? God provided. He spared his son, he gave him a ram, we all know the story, it's good news. But you know what? It's not just a guarantee that God's going to provide, period. Right. If you go to your own mountain, if you go your own routes, there's a blessing and a curse that's put before us today. There is a promise and a guarantee that on the mountain of the Lord, God will provide everything you need. On the mountain of Jimmy,